building your reputation with executives and key players in your industry. So a lot of the things we'll talk about today don't just apply to corporate professionals internally within a company, but also externally. If you're an entrepreneur or business owner, or if you're someone who's just trying to increase your influence in your field in general, a lot of these principles apply regardless. One book recommendation I'm going to give to everybody is How to Get a Meeting with Anyone by Stu Heinecke. How to Get a Meeting with Anyone. It's a really great book. It's really interesting, and it's a really fun book as well. And so he's actually a former cartoonist with the Wall Street Journal, and so he has a lot of interesting points. And maybe I'll get into some of those in a little bit as we continue. So there's a couple of key things to discuss here. How to identify those key people, those key executives, how to determine what those people want and what they need and what they value, how they learn about new contributors in their industry or in the company, and then how you can get yourself noticed or get on their radar to increase your exposure. And so that leverages your reputation and improves your personal brand with them. So we can get into all those different details. Are there any other details that you think are relevant for this discussion, Julie?
I think just, and we can get into this later, but talking about personal brand and your personal image, your professional image, I think all of that is going to play into something like this and getting meetings and whatnot. So
yeah, exactly. So in terms of identifying the key people, a lot of times, we think of like the top boss, the CEO, let's say, or the CTO or the chief executive of some kind. But that's not necessarily the only person that you should be focused on in terms of increasing your influence and your personal brand. So ask around within the organization or in the industry, who's influential, who are the people that other people tend to follow or gravitate towards. Also search on social media and see who are the people in your industry or in your company that get a lot of likes or a lot of comments, seem to get a lot of attention or traffic to their content, for example. And I would also say you don't just want to identify the target person in question, but also people close to them, like VPs. We're talking about a CEO, for example, VPs or their lieutenants, as well as executive assistants. And the executive assistants is something I'm probably going to come back to in a little bit, because they're often seen as the gatekeeper, as kind of an obstacle towards you connecting with your target person. But actually the executive assistants and the secretaries are potential allies or friends if you approach them in the right way. So those are all people that you want to build relationships with. And a lot of times the VPs or people that are close or adjacent to your target person are lower hanging fruit. They're easier to get in contact with. So hypothetically, if you wanted to get in touch with Tim Cook, who's the head of Apple, that's a person who is very hard to get in contact with, right? It's not impossible, but it's going to take some time. But let's say person number 3 at Apple, or person number 5, or person number 8. Do you know who those people are? Probably not. I don't know who they are. So they're probably easier to connect with at least a little bit, and to build a relationship with. And then over time, that can be leveraged into a relationship with Tim Cook, who would be your target, ultimate target in question. So those are some of my thoughts in terms of identifying the key people. Think creatively and think broadly about how to find those people. What do you think about that, Julie?
I think that's an excellent point. If my camera is flashing lights, do you guys see what I'm seeing? I'm not sure.
Maybe it has to do with the sunlight or something. I don't know.
It seems like every time I move or something, it's flashing. So I apologize.
But I bet you anything it's your necklace. That's like,
is that what it is?
It's the shine. Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's an excellent point. I feel like, finding other people who are more accessible, who are more attainable, those are the people who you really want to focus on. Anybody who may have a little bit more, you don't go straight for the big dog if you don't have that kind of connection, if you don't have a relationship with them. So, start with people who you have connections with, start with people who who know people who can help you. I feel like that's really where it's going to help. And, work those relationships that you have. Hopefully you've got a network established and somebody knows somebody within the company. And I think that will help you get closer to your goal there.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, talking with people that you have direct, easier access to is very important. Because a lot of times when we think about connecting with key players or very influential people, it can be kind of paralyzing. Like, how do I even begin that process? But you want to be having conversations along these lines. You can call them like research conversations or reconnaissance conversations on a weekly basis, 3 or 4 conversations per week. A lot of people only do this when they're looking for a job or when they are actively trying to get promoted. And so there's like an urgent need, but it should really be an ongoing process, because that's how you build up your reputation and your personal brand over time. So exactly to your point, Julie, is like, have those conversations, those interactions with people, and start talking about these things, asking around, hey, who's in charge of this project? Who's a really key stakeholder on this? And that'll give you some really good insights. So how to determine what those key people want? What do they value? What's important to them? That's the next question. Okay, so I know who I'm trying to target. This is a person who's going to make a big difference in my career, is going to make a big difference in my business. But what exactly do they need, right? And we want to be thinking always about what their priorities are, because that's how we're going to influence them most effectively. Because you know exactly what you want, and that's good for you. But what do they want? That's the key question. That's oftentimes the more complex question. So some of my thoughts on this are to look at what they say in front of the media. And the media, when I say the media, it doesn't just have to be like some gigantic outlet like CNBC or ABC News or something like that, although it certainly could be, because that gives you an indication, gives you at least some clues in terms of what's top of mind for them. But also smaller podcasts or blogs in the industry, or if they do, an interview with a YouTube channel that has 2,000 followers, for example, but it's relevant in your field or your industry. Internally, if you're talking about within your company, the company newsletter, for example. What is, let's just take the CEO. What has the CEO said in the company newsletter recently in the last few months? What are some key themes that he or she has brought up? That gives you clues in terms of the major themes and phrases and keywords that are top of mind to that person. Also look at their social media channels. So an interesting example of this is a client of mine. We were looking at the editor-in-chief of like a major magazine along the lines of Entrepreneur magazine. We were trying to do some reconnaissance, get a sense of how to get that person's attention. So in the course of researching the person, looking at his Twitter feed, looking at his Instagram, we discovered that he has like a side project of some new podcast that he just started with a few friends related to entrepreneurship in Latin America or something like that. And the Instagram account for that podcast only had 300 followers. So that is something that's clearly important to that person. If you send a DM to that Instagram account, you're probably going to get noticed. Very high likelihood that you're going to get that attention. Whereas if you go through the formal process of submitting the inquiry form on Entrepreneur website, much less likely that you're going to get direct contact with him, right? So looking at all of their social channels, whatever's public, basically, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc., that gives you a lot of clues as well in terms of what's important to them and how you can potentially make an introduction.
I love that. I'm so glad you brought up social media, because I was going to, if you didn't. Like, there's so much that you can learn about people just by viewing their, what they post on their platforms or their activity even as well. Some platforms enable you to see what they're liking or what else they're commenting on. So I feel like all of that's super important. I learned a great tip just last night, looking to do some PR. Go look at Twitter and look at, different news stations and just type in like that news station, whatever the call letters are, and then see how many people come up who work there. And you will see like many of them will have email addresses in their bios. And it was like, those are the people who are open to you contacting them for tips and stories and that kind of thing. And I feel like you can use that same exercise, in something like this. Are they open to communicating with others? Do they engage with others? On Twitter, you can definitely tell if they're replying to people or commenting on other things. But you can also get a sense of who they are on the personal side of things. Sometimes people will drop in little personal hints and here and there. If they're a dog lover, or they went to the movies this weekend, or whatever. I feel like those are all very important connection points, and help you relate to the person who you're trying to get a hold of. So thank you for bringing up social media.
Yeah, because that's going to make the conversation a lot more flowing as well. When you have a one-on-one interaction with them in person or over the phone. If they're a dog lover, you bring your dog knowledge. If they're a cat lover, you bring your cat knowledge and you talk to that as well, right? Or whatever, like you said, movies, music, all that stuff is just this kind of ancillary conversation material that you can use to kind of make the conversation more interesting and more engaging.
Yeah, I would say, when you're looking at somebody to target, you kind of want to develop some sort of avatar, if you will, or like a persona for this individual. Who are they? What do they do? What do they like to do? It's like figuring out the demographics and the psychographics as well. So are they well educated? Are they in a position of power? How much money do you think they make? What kind of car do they drive? What do they like to do on the weekends? What kind of music do they listen to? If you can start creating this persona, it will give you a better idea of who they are and how to talk to them and how to reach them.
Yeah, and it's a relatively simple process, actually, if you just sit down and do the work and think through those questions. But you can get some very good insights just by thinking logically about that and putting aside your assumptions, because a lot of times our assumptions about the target audience are erroneous. But put those aside temporarily and then just be open to what the marketplace kind of gives you in a way, right? And you get those kinds of insights. Now, when I say marketplace, again, that could be your executive team, because that's essentially the market for your ideas that you're trying to sell, or your proposals or your initiatives that you're trying to put out there, right? So yeah, just thinking through logically that process, that can go a very long way. Another thing to think about is who are they hiring? If you're talking about executives or even people that are outside of your company, but they're significant in your industry, maybe they have a team or maybe they have people they're partnering with. Who are they associating themselves with? That's significant. That gives you insight into a window into their psychology and what's important to them and what their values are, right? And in the case of hiring, putting people on the payroll, if you're looking at your C-level executives, they have a budget for hiring. So that is them taking ownership of certain hires. They're using company money and making those decisions. That's a risk for them. So what kind of a risk are they taking and what kinds of people are they bringing on to the payroll? That's very significant. That gives you a sense of what kinds of people are interesting and attractive to them, their personalities, their specialties, their backgrounds, their expertise, right? And so that all gives you clues and insights as well, just to look at what are their actions separate and apart from their words.
Yeah, I like that idea. I would even take it a step further too. And it's not just who they're hiring, but where are they hanging out, like professionally? Are they members of a chamber of commerce? Are they members of a professional trade organization? Do they subscribe to certain magazine publications and they read that, or they spend time on that forum online? Where do they hang out? And I feel like if you know that they're hanging out at the chamber after hours or whatever, if you happen to catch that in one of their tweets, maybe, or you just happen to go because you want to see who all's there. What a great way to start getting to know people. If you start running into the same people over and over again, or they start seeing you over and over again on social media, you're just going to naturally develop a relationship. And people like to work with those whom they know, like, and trust. And so you want to be that person. right? If you reach out and do like a cold call, they'll be like, who's this schmo, calling me? And you're like, well, sorry, But if you're just casually talking to them, well, over a beer or a cocktail or a glass of wine or what have you at a professional, chamber after hours, I think you'll be in good luck, have better luck with that, and start to build that relationship. And then you'll be able to do whatever it is that you want to do going forward.
Yeah, and there's another big benefit to that as well, which is confidence and feeling more comfortable with these key players or these impressive, high status people. A lot of times when I have these discussions with clients and students, there's a big factor of intimidation and being uncomfortable with someone who's so powerful and so significant, which of course, they're human beings at the end of the day. It's easy for us to forget that. But when you are going to those kinds of parties and those social activities and just spending time around those kinds of people, it normalizes it for you. So you generally gradually build up your confidence and your comfort level, which makes you much more effective in having those conversations and pitching something to them or getting a better sense of what their needs and their goals are, which all goes into the whole process of influence.
Yeah, excellent point. I feel like, if you're pitching anything, whether it's, hey, I want a job from you, or I want this project from you, or in my case last night, hey, will you share our story on the news, kind of thing. If they know who you are and if they can do a little research further on you to learn more about you, I feel like that's going to help you. Like if you had already connected with this person on Twitter, right? You guys already followed each other. That's going to help you establish that relationship better. Once you start engaging with them, they could go and look at your Twitter profile. They could look at Instagram. They could look at LinkedIn and see, who you are and see what kind of credibility you come with. So you've got to be prepared, and have, your stuff buttoned up, your I's dotted, your T's crossed, and make sure that you're presenting the image that you want to present, your professional brand, if you will, of what your image is. You want to make sure that it answers the questions and pardon me, you're going to be the person who is going to be able to solve whatever pain points that this person has, right? And so you can give them what it is that they want, whether it's through that job or that project or that news story. So yeah, I would say just, keep things professional but casual on social media and don't overthink it, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, people overthink things all the time. So we've gotten a sense of who these key people are, what they want, what makes them tick. So now to your point, it's like how to get noticed, how to get on their radar in a really great and powerful way. I would say, to your point, crossing your T's, dotting your I's, you want to make sure that you're great at your job, which is kind of basic and may seem kind of obvious, but that's a lot of times people can forget that. They can lose sight of that. If you're talking about persuading or getting more influential with top executives in your company, that's going to be one of the first things that they're looking at is, are you really great? Are you a really great contributor in your role, and are you adding value? So it's not the only thing, certainly, but that is something that is probably, not to say it's the easiest thing, but it's the most straightforward path towards increasing your influence and your visibility. It's definitely one critical component, because if you're really mediocre at your job, whether you're an employee or, for that matter, if you're a business owner or a freelancer, right, then people will notice that and they'll sense that, and that will definitely reduce your potential influence with them. So that's one critical thing. Another thing is to think outside the box and build something really powerful or unique. When I say build something, what does that mean? What is that something? It could be almost anything unique and unusual that you can think of. So some examples. Starting an event series. A lot of companies have an internal speaker series, for example, where different people from different parts of the organization or outside experts come in to speak to their subject matter, whatever their subject matter expertise is. And you could do that once a month, twice a month. You could be the instigator that creates that event series or a series of workshops or webinars, for example, for the people in your organization. You can put out insightful reports or memos or updates related to your field. And bear in mind, all of these creative out of the box ideas are things that relate to your strengths in terms of your natural ability. So if you're a really great writer, for example, you can write reports, you can write updates, you can write articles that get circulated internally within your organization, or for that matter, you can write blog posts and articles externally if you're a business owner. If you're a terrible writer, then don't worry about that strategy, right? Maybe you're really great at organizing people. Maybe you're really great at generating hype and interest among groups of people and organizing logistics. So then you would start organizing events. And that's a way to leverage your strength and your natural talent to increase influence and exposure with those top people. Same idea with a video series. You can create a series of videos. Maybe you're really great on camera, or you speak, you're a really great speaker. You have a confident demeanor and everything. So maybe video is going to be a natural strength for you, for example. So you could do a series of videos that are informative or educational for people within your organization. That's the kind of unique thing that will get the attention of top executives, right? Or a podcast, right? Let's say that you have a really great voice, right? So you can leverage that in a podcast format, and that might be, maybe you're afraid to be on camera or you're camera shy. So nevertheless, you can create content in the form of a podcast series. And all of these, of course, apply outside of a corporate context. They're kind of entrepreneurial ventures within a corporate context. But if you're an entrepreneur or business owner, these are the kinds of things, again, that will get attention of your key target market.
You make some great points here. In the marketing world, we call a lot of that social proof. When you have that kind of expertise and you show it in various ways, and even if you do a great job on a project or in your work life, if you can get referrals, if you can get testimonials, if you can get reviews, all of that really is going to help you. And when people go to check you out, when they do their research on you, like I said, everybody's just curious, like, who's this Julie girl? Why is she knocking on my door, right? They're going to go check me out. That's just common. And like in the dating world, right, it's the same thing. You would hopefully Google somebody before you go out with them. So the thing is like you want to have your I's dotted and your T's crossed. To your original point of, you've got to do your job and do it well. Like I see this all the time in the volunteer world, especially, where we have people who serve on committees and on boards and who say that they're going to do things and they make these commitments and then they don't follow through, but yet they want us to refer them later on for future work. And I'm like, how can I refer you when I can't trust that you're going to finish this job and do it well, So everything kind of plays into each other. So if you want to build your brand reputation and you really want to attract, these higher power people, or whoever it is that you're trying to attract, like do everything in your power to make your image look good. Like Justin said, write those articles, write those blog posts. If you're not a good writer, do videos, or maybe it's just, thoughtful LinkedIn posts. Anything that shows that you're a thought leader, you've got expertise in a certain area or authority in a certain area. And so people know that they can count on you for those kind of things. But yeah, know your strengths and weaknesses. If you're not a good writer, outsource to somebody who is, same thing with social media. If you're not good with social media, there's nothing wrong with outsourcing or finding a freelancer to help you out with those tasks.
Yep, absolutely. I'm going to share our next webinar. We do this every Tuesday, as many of you know. So next week, I'm going to be doing an analysis of Ginny Rometty, who is the former CEO of IBM and the first woman CEO of IBM. And she's a really interesting speaker. So if you're interested in public speaking skills and presentation skills specifically, that'll be very interesting. So check out that link. I want to make sure that we have time for questions. If there's any questions or anything that we've talked about that you're curious about, you'd like to ask a little bit more about, feel free to put a comment or a question in the chat or in the Q&A. But other than that, I'll just also mention one more thing. I mean, we could talk about this topic for hours because this is such an interesting and fascinating topic. Increasing your influence, becoming more persuasive in your field. Take advantage of small opportunities. You know, a lot of times we have this instant gratification thing where we want, I want it all and I want it now, like the Queen song, right? I want it all and I want it now. But that's not realistic in all cases. Sometimes you got to take a small win that still advances the ball a little bit. And an example of that is a client of mine who wanted to get featured in Forbes and to be a writer in Forbes. And so through his company's PR agency, he was able to get a small writing opportunity in Forbes. And, it was nothing significant, but it was some kind of contribution just to make that initial contact with the editor and to kind of show them what he was capable of producing. So, okay, so that was great. So that was useful to them. 6 months go by. And out of the blue, one of the editors at Forbes reaches back out to that PR agency and says, hey, we're going in a slightly different direction now. We want to add more experts in data science. This is his field. Do you think your contact would be useful or could contribute as like a full contributor on Forbes.com? And so now he's writing for Forbes and he's getting published there once or twice a month. And he would actually do it even more frequently if he wasn't busy with a lot of other things. But that's an example of taking advantage of small opportunities that get you closer to the level of prestige or the level of influence that you're ultimately going for. So especially the more ambitious your ultimate goal is, or the more inaccessible the key person is that you're trying to reach, the longer the game is going to be. So patience makes a big difference and gradually building that up.
Yeah, baby steps all the way, and I feel like even just small wins, like, oh, they followed you back on Twitter, that's something to celebrate and just keep going, and yeah, it's probably going to take some time. So, be realistic in that regard, and don't be disappointed right away because, these things may even come back 4 years later. Who knows? You might get that opportunity. So just keep up the hope and keep going.
Yeah, that's a great point. I agree with that. And I've seen that many times, what you're guaranteed to not, you're guaranteed to not get the result you want if you're too aggressive, right? If you're overly persistent. People in power hate that. If you're too ingratiating or you're too desperate or you have any kind of desperate energy like that, that's annoying. People don't like that. It'll be a turnoff. But be a good person. Be someone who adds value. Be patient, work the relationships and everything. Like gradually you build up that influence over time. And yeah, to your point, it could take months or even years in some cases, but the payoff will be very significant. So that's a great point there. If there's no other questions or topics from anybody, we're going to leave it there for today. So again, we do a webinar every Tuesday at 12 Central, 1 Eastern. And there's all types of topics that we cover in these webinars, from assertiveness to presentation skills, public speaking skills, and many other things, influence, reputation, personal branding. So definitely check us out if you're not already. Check out the link for next week's webinar. And I want to thank everybody for joining, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you.